Hello, I'm Annie, and these are my musings. So, if you've clicked on this video, you already know what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction anyway. Hopefully this will go up pretty soon. It's January 25th when I'm recording this, so there's a strike going on to support the Palestinian people, and that's going until the 28th, I believe. So if you can participate in any way, like boycotting things, sharing information online, just, whatever you can do it. It's not too late to join. In this video, there are a couple of things I want to talk about. So first of all, South Africa's court case against Israel supporting the Palestinian people. And the second thing is the Western countries bombing Yemen for blocking ships to Israel. Again, supporting Palestinian people. So basically, I'm going to be reading out a lot of, not all of it, but a lot of South Africa's case, because I think, I'm going to put a link in the description to the full thing if anyone wants to read it. I believe they're supposed to be announcing the decision tomorrow. It's January 25th, Thursday, when I'm filming this. So they're gonna announce it tomorrow, which is Friday. I really, really hope that they get what they want, that they get the provisional measures, and if not, that'll suck. I don't really know how to start out this video. It's a lot. It's very sort of in-depth. But what I will say is that just keep doing what you can, keep helping people, keep, supporting people in whatever way you possibly can, and and just, don't give up on it. I know it gets very hard. I mean, I'm struggling too. But you can't give up. So don't. So basically, I'm going to be reading things that South Africa said in their case against Israel supporting Palestine. So, and I'm going to be discussing them. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as I possibly can, but it's going to be long. So, hopefully I'll put some timestamps or something in the description, so you can sort of navigate the video. I would recommend watching the whole thing because it's gonna be a lot of good information, I think, which is why I'm sharing it at all. I'm gonna start by reading things from South Africa's case. I did read the whole thing myself, I did not read Israel's case yet. I might read that at some point, and respond to it or something. But at the time, after I finished reading South Africa's, I was like, that was very long. So I didn't read it yet. In our application, South Africa has recognized the ongoing Nakba of the Palestinian people through Israel's colonization since 1948, which has systematically and forcibly displaced, dispossessed, and fragmented the Palestinian people, deliberately denying them their internationally recognized inalienable right to self-determination and their internationally recognized right of return as refugees to their towns and villages in what is now the State of Israel. We are also particularly mindful of Israel's institutionalized regime of discriminatory laws, policies, and practices designed and maintained to establish domination, subjecting the Palestinian people to apartheid on both sides of the Green Line. Decades-long impunity for widespread and systematic human rights violations has emboldened Israel in its recurrence and intensification of international crimes in Palestine. At the outset, South Africa acknowledges that the genocidal acts and omissions by the State of Israel inevitably form part of a continuum of illegal acts perpetrated against the Palestinian people since 1948. The application places Israel's genocidal acts and omissions within the broader context of Israel's 75-year apartheid, 56-year occupation, and 16-year siege imposed on the Gaza Strip. A siege which itself has been described by the director of UNRWA Affairs in Gaza as a silent killer of people. As the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, hereinafter CERD, warned on December 21st, hate speech and dehumanizing discourse targeted at Palestinians is raising severe concerns regarding Israel's and other state parties' obligation to prevent crimes against humanity and genocide in the Gaza Strip. This warning has been followed by a succession of warnings, including by 37 United Nations Special Rapporteurs, of the failure of the international system to mobilize to prevent genocide in Gaza. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for now. So basically, at the beginning, they're basically like putting everything in context, right? So, according to what they're saying, this whole thing really started in 1948, not 2023, so that's like one of the major points they're making. Also, Palestinian people do not really have equal rights. That's another major point. And they also can't return to their home. They have no right to do that, apparently. Which is just weird. Like, imagine someone came to your house and was like, well, we're gonna live here now, and you just have to leave. Like, you wouldn't like that, would you? No, In extending our hands across the miles to the people of Palestine, we do so in the full knowledge that we are part of a humanity that is at one. The words of our founding president, Nelson Mandela. This is the spirit in which South Africa acceded to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the Convention, in 1998. This is the spirit in which we approach this court. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for now. I'm going to reread part of that. In extending our hands across the miles to the people of Palestine, we do so in the full knowledge that we are part of humanity that is at one. Basically, what they're saying there is we're all human beings. We're all people. We all deserve to be treated well. And if one person, no matter where they are in the world, is not being treated well, then all of us need to care about that. So, South Africa's calling some people out. As a contracting party to the convention, this is a commitment we owe to the people of Palestine and Israelis alike. As previously mentioned, the violence and the destruction in Palestine and Israel did not begin on October 7, 2023. The Palestinians have experienced systematic oppression and violence for the last 76 years on October 6, 2023, and every day since October 7, 2023. In the Gaza Strip, at least since 2005, Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossings, water, electricity, and civilian infrastructure, as well as over key government functions. Entry and exit by air and sea to Gaza is strictly prohibited, with Israel operating the only two crossing points. Given that continuing effective control by Israel over the territory of Gaza, Gaza is still considered by the international community to be under belligerent occupation by Israel. Okay, so basically, the Israeli government is controlling Gaza and all of Palestine, really. And they're sort of dictating who can enter and leave and all these kind of things. Yeah, it says entry and exit by air and sea to Gaza is strictly prohibited. So you can't even enter or exit. That's definitely oppression. I don't know how it could be seen any other way. South Africa unequivocally condemned the targeting of civilians by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups and the taking of hostages on October 7, 2023, and has again expressly recorded this condemnation, most recently in its note farewell to Israel on December 21st, 2023. That said, no armed attack on a state's territory, no matter how serious, even an attack involving atrocity crimes, can provide any justification for or defense to breaches of the convention, whether as a matter of law or morality. Let me just read that again. No armed attack on a state's territory, no matter how serious. Even an attack involving atrocity crimes can provide any justification for or defense to breaches of the convention, whether as a matter of law or morality. So basically, they're saying that, although they condemn the attacks that happened on October 7th, 2023, it's still not an excuse for genocide, though. Nothing is. You can't, blame or punish or treat an entire group of people badly for the actions of some of that group. That's just not fair. Israel's response to the October 7, 2023 attack has crossed this line and gives rise to the breaches of the convention. Faced with such evidence and our duty to do what we can do to prevent genocide as contained in Article 1 of the convention, the South African government initiated this case. Okay. Gaza is one of the two constituent territories of the occupied Palestinian territories occupied by Israel since 1967. It is a narrow strip of approximately 365 square kilometers. Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossings, water, electricity, electromagnetic sphere, and civilian infrastructure in Gaza, as well as over key governmental functions. As the Honorable Minister has said, entry and exit by air and sea to Gaza is prohibited, with Israel operating the only two crossing points. Gaza, which is one of the most densely populated places in the world, is home to approximately 2.3 million Palestinians, almost half of them children. For the past 96 days, that's over 100 by now, Israel has subjected Gaza to what has been described as one of the heaviest conventional bombing campaigns in the history of modern warfare. Palestinians in Gaza are being killed by Israeli weaponry and bombs from air, land, and sea. They're also at immediate risk of death by starvation, dehydration, and disease as a result of the ongoing siege by Israel, the destruction of Palestinian towns, the insufficient aid being allowed through to the Palestinian population, and the impossibility of distributing this limited aid while bombs fall. This conduct renders essentials to life unobtainable. So basically, not only are they being bombed, they could also die by starvation, dehydration, disease, injuries, like all these kind of things, because they're not getting enough aid, and the aid that they are getting, you can't really distribute it while you're being bombed. Okay, so this next part I feel is important for everyone to know, because I didn't actually know this before I read it. At this provisional measure stage, as this court has made clear in the Gambia versus Myanmar case, it is not necessary for the court to come to a final view on the question of whether Israel's conduct constitutes genocide. It is necessary to establish only whether at least some of the acts alleged are capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. On analyzing the specific and ongoing genocidal acts complained of, it is clear that at least some, if not all, of these acts fall within the Convention's provisions. So basically what that's saying is they don't have to come to like a final conclusion. They just have to decide whether or not some of Israel's actions are genocide. I'm gonna go through like all the acts that they're talking about. The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, in violation of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. As the UN Secretary General explained 5 weeks ago, the level of Israel's killing is so extensive that nowhere is safe in Gaza. As I stand before you today, 23,210 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces during the sustained attacks over the last 3 months, at least 70% of whom are believed to be women and children. That number would have gone up, by the way. Some 7,000 Palestinians are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Palestinians in Gaza are subjected to relentless bombing wherever they go. They are killed in their homes, in places where they seek shelter, in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in churches, and as they try to find food and water for their families. They have been killed if they fail to evacuate, in the places to which they have fled, and even while they attempted to flee along Israeli-declared safe routes. The level of killing is so extensive that those whose bodies are found are buried in mass graves, often unidentified. So basically, what they're saying here is there's nowhere really that's safe for them to go. And because even when they go to where the government of Israel told them, like, oh, go there, you'll be safe there, they're getting bombed. They're still getting bombed. They're bombing hospitals, they're bombing schools, churches, like so many places where people are going to be safe, and they're not safe. They're being bombed. Okay. In the first 3 weeks alone, following October 7th, Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week. 6,000 bombs per week. That's a lot. At least 200 times, it has deployed 2,000-pound bombs in southern areas of Palestine designated as safe. These bombs have also decimated the north, including refugee camps. 2,000-pound bombs are some of the biggest and most destructive bombs available. They are dropped by lethal fighter jets that are used to strike targets on the ground by one of the world's most resourced armies. Israel has killed an unparalleled and unprecedented number of civilians with the full knowledge of how many civilian lives each bomb will take. More than 1,800 Palestinian families in Gaza have lost multiple family members, and hundreds of multi-generational families have been wiped out, with no remaining survivors. Mothers, fathers, children, siblings, grandparents, aunts, cousins, often all killed together. This killing is nothing short of destruction of Palestinian life. It is inflicted deliberately. No one is spared, not even newborn babies. The scale of Palestinian child killing in Gaza is such that United Nations chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. The devastation we submit is intended to and has laid waste to Gaza beyond acceptable legal, let alone humane, justification. Basically, they're dropping all these bombs, these very intense bombs, and they are doing it deliberately. They know exactly how many people will be killed by these bombs. Like, hundreds of entire families have been wiped out. Like, what? Hundreds of entire families are just gone now? As they say at the end, the devastation we submit is intended to and has laid waste to Gaza beyond any acceptable legal, let alone humane, justification. Yes, I agree. Israel's attacks have left close to 60,000 Palestinians wounded and maimed. Again, the majority of them women and children. This is in circumstances where the healthcare system has all but collapsed. I return to this later in my speech. Large numbers of Palestinian civilians, including children, are arrested, blindfolded, forced to undress, and loaded onto trucks taken to unknown locations. The suffering of the Palestinian people, physical and mental, is undeniable. I guess they're going through a lot. They're really suffering, and people need help. They need help. Hopefully tomorrow the results will be good. The court will do something. But it might not. We have no way of knowing for sure. And that's definitely scary. If it's scary for me, I can only imagine how scary it is for the Palestinian people. Like, they're literally waiting to hear, like, if they'll be able to survive or not. Like, that's messed up. Israel has deliberately imposed conditions on Gaza that cannot sustain life and are calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Israel achieves this in at least 4 ways. First, by displacement. Israel has forced the displacement of about 85% of Palestinians in Gaza. There is nowhere safe for them to flee to. Those who cannot leave or refuse to be displaced have either been killed or are at extreme risk of being killed in their homes. Imagine that. Imagine, like, someone's like, oh, we can drop a bomb on your house. You have to leave. And you're like, I don't want to leave, or I can't leave, or, maybe there's elderly people or disabled people and who just can't leave, and they're gonna get killed. That's so sad, so tragic. Many Palestinians have been displaced multiple times, as families are forced to move repeatedly in search of safety. Israel's first evacuation order on October 13th required the evacuation of over 1 million people, including children, the elderly, the wounded and infirm. Entire hospitals were required to evacuate, even newborn babies in intensive care. The order required them to evacuate the north to south within 24 hours. The order itself was genocidal and required immediate movement, taking only what could be carried. While no humanitarian assistance was permitted, and fuel, water, and food, and other necessities of life had deliberately been cut off. It was clearly calculated to bring about the destruction of the population. For many Palestinians, the forced evacuation from their homes is inevitably permanent. Israel has now damaged or destroyed an estimated 355,000 Palestinian homes, leaving at least 500,000 Palestinians with no home to return to. Imagine that. Imagine, like, you do leave, right? So you go somewhere safe, and then they destroy your house. Like, I can only imagine. Second, together with the forced displacement, Israel's conduct has been deliberately calculated to cause widespread hunger, dehydration, and starvation. Israel's campaign has pushed Gazans to the brink of famine. An unprecedented 93% of the population in Gaza is facing crisis levels of hunger. Of all the people in the world currently suffering catastrophic hunger, more than 80% are in Gaza. Wow. That's a lot. 80%. On January 8th, a planned mission by United Nations agencies to deliver urgent medical supplies and vital fuel to a hospital was denied by Israeli authorities. This marked the fifth denial of a mission to the center since December 26th, leaving 5 hospitals in northern Gaza without access to life-saving medical equipment and supplies. Third, Israel has deliberately inflicted conditions in which Palestinians in Gaza are denied adequate shelter, clothes, or sanitation. For weeks, there have been acute shortages of clothes, bedding, blankets, and critical non-food items. Clean water is all but gone, leaving far below the amount required to safely drink, cook, and clean. Accordingly, the WHO has stated that Gaza is experiencing soaring rates of infectious disease outbreaks. Cases of diarrhea in children under 5 years of age have increased 2,000% since hostilities began. When combined and left untreated, malnutrition and disease create a deadly cycle. Well, just like, so they don't have clothes, they don't have shelter, they don't have sanitation, and all of that leads to diseases breaking out and, people not getting enough food, not getting enough water. Like, that's so sad, so tragic, so just wrong. I'm gonna reread part of that. Cases of diarrhea in children under 5 have increased 2,000%. since hostilities began. 2,000%. Like, children under 5 are getting diarrhea, like, 2,000% more than usual. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot. The fourth genocidal act under Article 2 is Israel's military assault on Gaza's healthcare system, which renders life unsustainable. Even by December 7th, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health noted that the healthcare infrastructure in the Gaza Strip has been completely obliterated. Those wounded by Israel in Gaza are being deprived of life-saving medical care. Gaza's healthcare system, already crippled by years of blockade and prior attacks by Israel, is unable to cope with the sheer scale of the injuries. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls has pointed to acts committed by Israel that would fall under the fourth category of genocidal acts in Article 2 of the Convention. On November 22nd, she expressly warned the following: the reproductive violence inflicted by Israel on Palestinian women, newborn babies, infants, and children could be classified as acts of genocide on Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, including imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group. Israel is blocking the delivery of life-saving aid, including essential medical kits for delivering babies, in circumstances where an estimated 180 women are giving birth in Gaza each day. Of these 180 women, the WHO warns that 15% are likely to experience pregnancy or birth-related complications and need additional medical care. That care is simply not available. Imagine you're pregnant and, like, you can't get the care you need. Like, that's gotta be hard. That's gotta be really, really hard. All of these acts, individually and collectively, form a calculated pattern of conduct by Israel, indicating a genocidal intent. This intent is evident from Israel's conduct in especially targeting Palestinians living in Gaza, using weaponry that causes large-scale homicidal destruction, as well as targeted sniping of civilians, designating safe zones for Palestinians to seek refuge and then bombing them, depriving Palestinians in Gaza of basic needs: food, water, healthcare, fuel, sanitation, and communications, destroying social infrastructure, homes, schools, mosques, churches, hospitals, and killing, seriously injuring, and leaving large numbers of children orphaned. That's very well written. I don't really have anything to add to that. So, every day there is mounting irreparable loss of life, property, dignity, and humanity for the Palestinian people. Our news feeds show graphic images of suffering that have become unbearable to watch. Nothing will stop this suffering except an order from this court. Without an indication of provisional measures, the atrocities will continue, with the Israeli Defense Forces indicating that they intend pursuing this course of action for at least a year. They intend to bomb all the Palestinian people for a year? Really? Really? Okay. There is an extraordinary feature in this case, that Israel's political leaders, military commanders, and persons holding official positions have systematically and in explicit terms declared their genocidal intent. And these statements are then repeated by soldiers on the ground in Gaza as they engage in the destruction of Palestinians and the physical infrastructure of Gaza. We show this third element next. On October 7th, in a televised address, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war on Gaza. Israel had started clearing out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists, and he warned of an unprecedented price to be paid by the enemy. There are more than 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. Israel is the occupying power in control of Gaza. It controls entry, exit, and the internal movements of inside Gaza. And Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu exercises overall command over the Israeli Defense Forces and in turn the Palestinians in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in his address to the Israeli forces on October 28, 2023, preparing for the invasion of Gaza, urged the soldiers to remember what Amalek has done to you. This refers to the biblical command by God to Saul for the retaliatory destruction of an entire group of people known as the Amalekites. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. The genocidal invocation to Amalek was anything but idle. It was repeated by Mr. Netanyahu in a letter to the Israeli Armed Forces on November 3rd, 2023. The Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, has called for the erasure of the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. The Defense Force agrees. On October 9th, the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant gave a situation update to the army, where he said that as Israel was imposing a complete siege on Gaza, there would be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything would be closed, because Israel is fighting human animals. Speaking to troops on the Gaza border, he instructed them that he has released all the restraints, and that Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. We will reach all places. Eliminate everything. Reach all places. Without any restraints. Well, I don't know what to say that, but they're basically going through like all of the genocidal things that people connected to the Israeli government have been saying. And, you know, it's like, you're literally saying these things, and then you're literally saying these things, and then you're later claiming like, oh, but I didn't mean it that way though. Yes, you did. You meant it. And they say later on, I think, if the people who said these things didn't mean them, they wouldn't have been said. And I agree. So I'm gonna keep reading. The theme of destruction of human animals was reiterated by an Israeli Army Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, COGAT, on October 9, 2023, who, in an address to Hamas and the residents of Gaza, stated that Hamas has become ISIS and that the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of being horrified. He concluded that human animals are dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade on Gaza. No electricity, no water, just damage. You wanted hell, you will get hell. The language of systematic dehumanization is evident here. Human animals, both Hamas and civilians, are condemned. Within the Israeli cabinet, this is also a widely held view. The Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, Israel Katz, called for the denial of water and fuel as this is what will happen to people of children killers and slaughterers. This admits of no ambiguity. It means to create conditions of death of the Palestinian people in Gaza. To die a slow death because of starvation and dehydration, or to die quickly because of a bomb attack or snipers, but to die nevertheless. In fact, Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu said that Israel must find ways for Gazans that are more painful than death. It is no answer to say that neither are in command of the army. They are ministers in the Israeli government. They vote in the Knesset and are in a position to shape state policy. The intent to destroy Gaza has been nurtured at the highest levels of state, as President Isaac Herzog has joined the ranks of those signing bombs destined for Gaza, having previously noted that the entire population in Gaza is responsible, and that this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, is absolutely not true. We will fight until we break their backbone. Later attempts by the president and others to neutralize this speech have not altered the sting of his words, which was to tar all Palestinians as responsible for the actions of Hamas. These are orders to destroy, and to maim what cannot be destroyed. These statements are not open to neutral interpretations or after-the-fact rationalizations and reinterpretations by Israel. The statements were made by persons in command of the state. They communicated state policy. It is simple. If the statements were not intended, they would not have been made. That's exactly what I was saying. The genocidal intent behind these statements is not ambiguous to the Israeli soldiers on the ground. Indeed, it is directing their actions and objectives. On December 7th, 2023, Israeli soldiers proved that they understood the Prime Minister's message to remember what Amalek has done to you as genocidal. They were recorded by journalists dancing and singing, "We know our motto, there are no one involved, that they obey one commandment, to wipe off the seed of Amalek." The Prime Minister's invocation of Amalek is being used by soldiers to justify the killing of civilians, including children. These are the soldiers repeating the inciting words of their Prime Minister. Israeli soldiers in Gaza were filmed dancing, chanting, and singing in November. "May their village burn, may Gaza be erased." There is now a trend among the soldiers to film themselves committing atrocities against civilians in Gaza in a form of snuff video. One recorded himself detonating over 50 houses in Shujaiya. Other soldiers were recorded singing, "We will destroy all of Khan Yunis and this house. We will blow it up for you and for everything you do for us." These are the soldiers putting into effect their command. Soldiers obviously believe that this language and their actions are acceptable because the destruction of Palestinian life in Gaza is articulated state policy. Senior political and military officials encouraged without censure the 95-year-old Israeli army reservist Ezra Yachin, a veteran of the Deir Yassin massacre against the Palestinians in 1948. To speak to the soldiers ahead of the ground invasion in Gaza. In his tour, he echoed the same sentiment while being driven around in an official Israeli army vehicle dressed in Israeli army fatigues. Be triumphant and finish them off, and don't leave anyone behind. Erase the memory of them. Erase them, their families, mothers, and children. These animals can no longer live. If you have an Arab neighbor, don't wait. Go to his home and shoot him. We want to invade, not like before. We want to enter and destroy what's in front of us, and destroy houses, then destroy the one after it. With all of our forces, complete destruction, enter and destroy. As you can see, we will witness things we've never dreamed of. Let them drop bombs on them and erase them. Any suggestion that senior politicians did not mean what they said, much less that the meaning was not understood by soldiers in Gaza, would be without any merit. The genocidal rhetoric is also commonplace within the Israeli Knesset. Members of the Knesset have repeatedly called for Gaza to be wiped out and flattened, erased, and crushed on all its inhabitants. They've deplored anyone feeling sorry for the uninvolved Gazans, asserting repeatedly that there are no uninvolved, that there are no innocents in Gaza, that the killers of the women and children should not be separated from the citizens of Gaza, that the children of Gaza have brought this upon themselves, and that there should be one sentence for everyone there: death. The Prime Minister's genocidal speech has gained ground among some elements of civil society. A famous singer has repeated Mr. Netanyahu's Amalek reference, stating that Gaza must be wiped out and be destroyed with every Amalek seed. We simply must destroy all of Gaza and exterminate everyone who is there. Exterminate everyone who is there. What are you, Daleks? Another has called to erase Gaza, not leave a single person there. Journalists and commentators have announced that the woman is an enemy, the baby is an enemy, the pregnant woman is an enemy, that it is necessary to turn the strip into a slaughterhouse, to demolish every house our soldiers come across, exterminate everyone. The intentional failure of the government of Israel to condemn, prevent, and punish such genocidal incitement constitutes in itself a grave violation of the Genocide Convention. We should recall that in Article 1 of the Convention, Israel confirmed that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, and it undertook to prevent and to punish it as such. This failure to prevent, condemn, and punish such speech by the government has served to normalize genocidal rhetoric and extreme danger for Palestinians within Israeli society. As MK Moshe Sada from the Likud party has said, the government's own attorneys share his views that Palestinians in Gaza must be destroyed. You go anywhere and they tell you to destroy them. In the kibbutz, they tell you to destroy them. My friends at the state attorney's office who fought with me on political issues in debates said to me, "It is clear that we need to destroy all Gazans." Destroy all Gazans. In conclusion, many propagators of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood, that they did not mean what they said, and that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to genocidal intent? Yet the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters: the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials and foot soldiers. Genocidal utterances are therefore not out in the fringes, they are embodied in state policy. Palestinians in Gaza is a very substantial and important part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group, simply but profoundly are entitled to exist. Yes, just they are entitled to exist, like every human being. As South Africa's ambassador pointed out in the opening, to situate the right to exist and the threats to that right requires the court to appreciate that this application by South Africa is brought within a particular context. What is happening in Gaza now is not correctly framed as a simple conflict between two parties. It entails, instead, destructive acts perpetrated by an occupying power, Israel, that has subjected the Palestinian people to an oppression and prolonged violation of their right to self-determination for more than half a century. And those violations occur in a world where Israel for years has regarded itself as beyond and above the law. As the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories explained in 2022, the occupation by Israel has been conducted in profound defiance of international law and hundreds of United Nations resolutions, with scant pushback from the international community. Scant pushback from the international community is right. Sadly, it's right. South Africa advances its case on the basis that Palestinians' rights are equally as worthy of protection on the unprecedented evidence before you as those of the victim groups that this honorable court has previously protected by its issuance of provisional measures in the past. Arif Hussein, the chief economist at the United Nations World Food Programme, chillingly warned a week ago, on January 3rd, "I've been doing this for the past 2 decades, and I've been to all kinds of conflicts and all kinds of crises. And for me, this is unprecedented, because of 1, the magnitude, the scale, the entire population of a particular place. 2nd, the severity, and 3rd, the speed at which this is happening, at which this has unfolded, is unprecedented. In my life, I've never seen anything like this, in terms of severity, in terms of scale, and then in terms of speed." South Africa has stressed that any motive or effort by Israel to destroy Hamas does not preclude genocidal intent by Israel towards the whole or part of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Evidence of other motives explaining its conduct as a perpetrator will not save Israel from a finding that it also possessed the requisite genocidal intent, and because of a fundamental feature of genocide, namely that the prohibitions on genocide and associated offenses are just cogent in nature. They are subject, therefore, to no exception or qualification. They are absolute in nature, in times of war and peace, always and everywhere. To find otherwise would not only be to treat Palestinians differently, as less worthy of protection than others. It would also be for the court to unduly limit its own competence, to turn its back upon its extensive prior jurisprudence, and to close its eyes to the breach of the rights which lie at the heart of the Convention, and which breaches are taking place in Gaza right now. United Nations General Assembly resolutions calling for a humanitarian ceasefire have been ignored. The situation could not be more urgent. Since these proceedings were initiated on December 29th, 2023 alone, an estimated over 1,703 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and over 3,252 injured. It'll be more now. Israel continues to deny that it is responsible for the humanitarian crisis it has created, even as Gaza starves. The aid it has belatedly begun to allow in is wholly inadequate and does not come anywhere close to the average 500 trucks being permitted daily before October 2023, even under the blockade. Any unilateral undertakings Israel might seek to give about future aid would not remove the risk of irreparable prejudice, not least considering Israel's past and current conduct towards the Palestinian people, including the 16 years of brutal siege on Gaza. As the United Nations Secretary General and all its chiefs have made clear, without a halt to Israel's military operations, crossings, aid convoys, and humanitarian workers, like everyone and everything else in Gaza, remain at imminent risk of a further irreparable prejudice. An unprecedented 148 United Nations staff have been killed to date. Without a halt to Israel's military activity in Gaza, there will be no end to the extreme situation facing Palestinian civilians. It would be a complete departure from the long and established line of jurisprudence that this court has firmly established and recently reconfirmed for the court not to order provisional measures in this case. The imminent risk of death, harm, and destruction that Palestinians in Gaza face today, and that they risk every day during the pendency of these proceedings, on any view, justifies, indeed compels, the indication of provisional measures. Some might say that the very reputation of international law, its ability and willingness to bind and to protect all peoples equally, hangs in the balance. It does. It definitely does. I agree. The international community continues to fail the Palestinian people, despite the overt dehumanizing genocidal rhetoric by Israeli government and military officials, matched by the Israeli army's actions on the ground, despite the horror of the genocide against the Palestinian people being live-streamed from Gaza to our mobile phones, computers, and television screens. The first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time, in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world might do something. Gaza represents nothing short of a moral failure, as described by the usually circumspect International Committee of the Red Cross. The world should be absolutely horrified. The world should be absolutely outraged. There is no safe space in Gaza, and the world should be ashamed. So this next part is from a sermon on Christmas Day in Bethlehem. Yes, Bethlehem, which is in, I believe, the West Bank, part of the Palestinian territories. No apologies will be accepted after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look at the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through genocide? Very powerful words, definitely. Like, where were you when this was happening? I think a lot of people always wonder, like, what would I do in history, or if I was in a fictional world being oppressed or whatever, and the answer is, whatever you're doing now. Some will ask why South Africa does not seek any court order against Hamas. this case concerns Israel's actions in Gaza, which is territory that, 3 weeks ago in Resolution 2720, the United Nations Security Council stressed it's an integral part of the territory occupied in 1967 by Israel. As the court will understand, Hamas is not a state, and cannot be a party to the Genocide Convention, and cannot be a party to these proceedings. There are other bodies and processes that can address the questions of steps to be taken in respect of past atrocities and against other actors, and they are no doubt considering what they should do. But as a matter of law, under the convention, South Africa cannot request an order from this court against Hamas. Secondly, South Africa understands that not all violence constitutes genocide. Acts of ethnic cleansing, collective punishment, the targeting of civilians, attacks on hospitals, and other war crimes are all unlawful, but they do not always violate the Genocide Convention. Genocide requires an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. But the fact that what Israel is doing in Gaza may also constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity is no defense and no bar to a charge of genocide. Israel says that Palestine and Palestinians are not its target, and that its aim is to destroy Hamas. But months of continuous bombing, flattening entire residential blocks, and cutting off food and water and electricity and communications to an entire population cannot credibly be argued to be a manhunt for members of Hamas. It is an indiscriminate attack, killing, maiming, and terrorizing the entire population of Gaza with no regard to questions of innocence or guilt, obliterating the homes and cities in which they live, and destroying any practical possibility of their return to make their homes amidst the rubble. Basically, what they're arguing there is like, Israel is probably going to say like, oh, we're not trying to kill all the Palestinians, we're looking for Hamas. But then why are you bombing civilians and, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches? Like, why are you doing that? And also, why are you cutting off electricity, communications, all that stuff to the entire population? If you're looking for Hamas, why do you need to do that? That doesn't make sense. To say it. If any military operation, no matter how carefully it is carried out pursuant to an intention to destroy people in whole or in part, it violates the Genocide Convention and it must stop. That is why all military operations capable of violating the Genocide Convention must cease. I should address the question of self-defense. In its advisory opinion in the Wall case, the court noted that the threat that Israel had argued justified the construction of the wall was not imputable to a foreign state, but emanated from territory, the occupied Palestinian territory, over which Israel itself exercises control. For those reasons, the court decided that as a matter of international law, the right of self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter had no relevance in such circumstances. 20 days ago, the Security Council affirmed yet again that Gaza is occupied territory. Though Israel refers to a complete withdrawal from Gaza, it has retained control over Gaza, over access by land, sea, and air, and over key government functions, and supplies of water and electricity. The tightness of its grip may have varied, but no one can doubt the continuous reality of Israel's grip on Gaza. The court's legal holding from 2004 remains good. So basically, they're saying you can't argue with self-defense if you're defending yourself from people who live in your own territory that you occupy. Because that's not, you control it. What Israel is doing in Gaza, it is doing in territory under its own control. Its actions are enforcing its occupation. The law on self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter has no application. But that is not the main point. The main point is much simpler. It is that no matter how monstrous or appalling an attack or provocation, genocide is never a permitted response. Every use of force, whether used in self-defense or in enforcing an occupation or in policing operations or otherwise, must stay within the limits set by international law, including the explicit duty in Article 1 of the Convention to prevent genocide. So basically what they're saying there is that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone does, you can't react by killing an entire group of people. That's not allowed. South Africa believes that the publicly available evidence of the scale of the destruction resulting from the bombardment of Gaza and the deliberate restriction of food, water, medicines, and electricity available to the population of Gaza demonstrates that the government of Israel, not Jewish people or Israeli citizens, the government of Israel and its military, is intent on destroying the Palestinians in Gaza as a group, and is doing nothing to prevent or punish the actions of others who support that aim. So basically what they're saying there is that the Israeli government is trying to destroy the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. And this is obviously only the fault of the Israeli government and the military, not, random Jewish people around the world, not even Israeli citizens, like just the government and the military are responsible for this, and they should therefore be punished for it. Okay, final part for South Africa's court case, and then I'm gonna go on to the Western countries bombing Yemen. Nothing can ever justify genocide, no matter what some individuals within the group of Palestinians in Gaza may have done, and no matter how great the threat to Israeli citizens might be. Genocidal attacks on the whole of Gaza and the whole of its population, with the intent of destroying them, cannot be justified. I think that's really simple. Like, no matter what happens, you can't, as a response to a crime, commit another crime and kill an entire group of people. That'd be like if, there was a shooting or a serial killer going around. Let's say there was a serial killer going around and, the description of that serial killer was, he was, an old white guy, let's say. You cannot, in response to that, go and kill every white guy you come across, can you? No, that's wrong. And this is the same case. This is basically the Palestinian people, all of the Palestinian people, being blamed for the actions of some, which is not fair. So I just have like some short notes for this part because I couldn't find as detailed information on this, but basically the Houthis, sort of military group in Yemen, were attacking any ships heading for Israel on the Red Sea. They're basically like blocking them from getting to Israel because they want Israel to stop killing the Palestinian people and allow humanitarian aid in. So basically they're staging like a protest. So apparently they also attacked an international shipping lane. Like some ship was trying to get stuff somewhere. I don't know. So the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, Bahrain, and the Netherlands all bombed Yemen, the country of Yemen, for what the Houthis did. So, in my opinion, this actually makes all of the above countries look bad because instead of bombing Yemen, they could have just pressured Israel to a ceasefire and achieve the same results with a lot less violence. So I'm going to link an article in the description box that basically goes through that in more detail. If anything, the attack will only help the Houthis gain more influence and power, which is probably the exact opposite of what these countries want. Their support for the Palestinian people has been very popular in Yemen and has increased recruitment. So I'm going to link an article about that in the description as well. This also makes the US and the other countries look bad because they can take action to prevent disruptions in shipping, but not to save human lives in Palestine. This makes these countries look like they care about their economies more than human lives. And that is most likely the exact opposite of what they want. Hopefully. So thank you for watching this video. If you've watched the whole thing, thank you. I know it's very long, but I think all of it is very important, and hopefully you've learned something from this video. Just keep doing what you can to help and support the Palestinian people, and yeah, support the strike. I'm gonna put some info in the description about that. And yeah, thank you for watching this video. I will see you in my next one. Bye.